In World War II, Soviet women flew bombing missions in wooden planes with their engines off. The Germans were so terrified they called them night witches. When Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, the Soviets were desperate. They needed every advantage. A famous Soviet aviator named Marina Raskova proposed an idea: all-female combat units. Stalin approved. In October 1941, the Soviet Air Force formed 3 all-female aviation regiments. The most famous became the 588th Night Bomber Regiment, later known as the Night Witches. These weren't privileged women or propaganda. They were real combat pilots flying real missions. The youngest was just 17. Most were in their early 20s. They came from all over the Soviet Union: students, factory workers, teachers. But there was a problem. The Soviet military gave them the worst equipment available. Their planes were Polikarpov Po-2s, outdated biplanes made of plywood and canvas. These planes were designed for crop dusting and training, not combat. They were slow, with a maximum speed of just 94 mph. They had no radios, no guns, no armor, no parachutes. They could only carry 2 bombs at a time. They were so flimsy that a single bullet could set them on fire. The women turned these disadvantages into advantages. Because the planes were slow and quiet, they could fly low without being detected by radar. And here's where the witch part comes in. They developed a terrifying tactic. At night, they'd fly toward German positions and cut their engines mid-flight. The planes would glide silently through the darkness. The only sound was the wind whistling through the wooden struts, a soft whooshing noise. German soldiers said it sounded like a witch's broomstick sweeping through the air. That's how they got the name Nachthexen, night witches. The Germans would be in their trenches or camps, and suddenly bombs would start falling from silent black sky. By the time they heard the whistle of the plane, the bombs were already dropping. By the time they could react, the night witches were gone. The pilots would restart their engines after dropping bombs and escape into the night. Then they'd fly back, reload, and do it again. Some crews flew 8 to 18 missions in a single night. The conditions were brutal. They flew in open cockpits in freezing temperatures, sometimes 40 degrees below zero. Their planes had no heating. Frost would form on their faces, but they kept flying. The Night Witches flew over 30,000 combat missions during the war. They dropped 23,000 tons of bombs. German commanders put bounties on them. Any pilot who shot down a Night Witch would automatically receive an Iron Cross. But shooting them down was hard. The planes flew too low and slow for German fighters to engage effectively. When Messerschmitts tried to slow down enough to target them, they'd stall and crash. 23 Night Witches were awarded the Hero of the Soviet Union, the highest military honor. 30 others died in combat. Their commander, Yevdokia Bershanskaya, flew over 900 missions. One of the most famous was Nadezhda Popova. She flew 852 missions and was shot down multiple times. Once her plane caught fire mid-flight. She landed it, put out the flames with her bare hands, patched the holes with whatever material she could find, and flew the next mission. When the war ended, the Night Witches were celebrated heroes in the Soviet Union. But in the West, their story was barely known. The Cold War meant Soviet achievements were downplayed or ignored. For decades, their incredible story was mostly forgotten outside Russia. It wasn't until the 1990s and 2000s that historians began properly documenting what they'd accomplished. These women flew outdated planes into enemy territory night after night for years. They endured freezing temperatures, constant danger, and the psychological toll of repeated combat missions. And they did it with equipment that should never have been used in combat. The Night Witches proved that courage and skill matter more than equipment. They turned a liability, terrible planes, into an advantage through tactics and determination. They terrified one of the most powerful militaries in history using wooden biplanes. So remember the Night Witches, the Soviet women who bombed Nazis in silent wooden planes and became legends. For more incredible true stories of courage from history, subscribe for new videos every other day. Thank you for watching.